When it comes to wavelength and photobiomodulation with red light and near-infrared devices, it's important to realize that not every wavelength is useful for every purpose, and also that wavelength greatly affects the depth of penetration.
It'll be fine. It's not built for speed, it's built for deep penetration.
All right, that's it. You promised no penetration jokes.
Oh, come on!
Occasionally people get confused because I will point to a study or device that has an exact wavelength that is slightly different than another study or device, and they worry that they're not going to get the benefits. Some devices may be 630, 650 nanometers, or even more at the orange range of 610 nanometers. Likewise, near-infrared devices tend to be in the 800 to 900 range, and these are all acceptable ranges that have benefits and drawbacks, and even going up to 1300 and 1400 might have some benefits for the near-infrared range. The first thing to realize, though, is that the longer the wavelength becomes, the more heat it generates in the body. Visible light won't generate much heat passing through the body at all, and in fact most of it just bounces off. So in the red light spectrum of about 625 to 700 nanometers, you don't have to worry much about heat at all. At around 700 nanometers, the red starts to shift into infrared, though it is still visible to many people until around 750, or even higher if it's very, very bright, like an intense laser. The higher this goes, the more heat is produced until around the 1000 nanometer mark, or 1 millimeter. At this point, what you really have is microwave radiation, and it produces a lot of heat. Be aware that many devices are marketed as near-infrared are actually very close to what you would get in your microwave oven, and you're basically microwaving your flesh. While heat itself can have some benefits, it is probably better to keep inside the therapeutic range of around 800 to 900 nanometers for near-infrared devices, though there's growing evidence that some higher ranges may be better for certain purposes. Otherwise, you're going to overheat very quickly, and doing too much could literally cook your flesh from the inside out. Some devices marketed for relief from flu and cold go up as high as 1200 or even 1400, so either avoid those or use them very sparingly. These still have benefits, but they can heat your body up very rapidly, and if you fell asleep in front of one, you could have very disastrous consequences. Red light and near-infrared both have the same job. The main benefit of near-infrared is the penetration. Red light really can't penetrate much beyond the skin itself, but thankfully it can also affect mitochondria in the blood. This is important for the brain because, for brain cooling purposes, there are lots of blood vessels just under the scalp that are easily reached by red light devices. It is now known that there are free-floating mitochondria in blood plasma, so this is probably the main beneficial mechanism for the brain itself when it comes to using only red light.
So these three mechanisms, the mitochondrial cytochrome C oxidase, the light heat gated ion channels, and the molecular rotor, all have roughly the same outcomes. Not the same, but similar outcomes. So this was an interesting discovery that didn't happen that long ago. There's a press release in January this year where they discovered that normal blood contains circulating, cell-free, respiratory competent mitochondria. And that said, does the blood we thought to know so well contain elements that had been undetectable until now? Which is quite interesting how they managed to miss them over hundreds of years. But the idea is that normal blood contains these cell-free mitochondria, and we know that mitochondria are easily activated by light. So the idea is this explains why you can shine light on one part of the body and it can have effects all over the body, systemic effect or action at a distance, if you will. Nevertheless, the light does have to get in the body, and only certain wavelengths can penetrate into tissue. And you see here the so-called tissue optical window between 600 and 1200 nanometers, showing that these are the wavelengths that can get in.
However, even though most brain studies use red light, it is probably better to use near-infrared for the brain, or a combination of near-infrared and red light. You will get much more penetration with near-infrared, though you can also get it with red light if enough LEDs are placed around the skull. The skull of an adult is difficult to penetrate, but a percentage will always get through, even if it's very small. And thanks to geometry, you can surround the skull with many lights from a helmet or similar contraption and ensure that the total amount reaching the brain will be high without overexposing the skin to red light. While most devices have red light in the 600 to 700 range, in fact other light colors also have many similar benefits, and they may even be more beneficial in some ways. The problem is they don't really penetrate very deeply, so don't worry too much about the wavelength of your red light devices, and also don't be afraid of blue light like many people will tell you to be. For infrared is another story. The entire benefit of near infrared over visible light is the deeper penetration. So if reaching very deep into the body is your aim, you may want a device that is at the higher end of the 800 to 900 nanometer range, or actually at around 810 to 830, because that's where the penetration tends to peak off. But you may get more penetration again if you go even higher. Just remember that the deeper the penetration, the more heat is going to be produced, and to be very careful with these longer wavelengths in the microwave range of 1000 plus. Penetration seems to max out around 800 nm, at least in the 800 to 900 range, so there's probably no additional benefit of going up to 880 or 890. There's a lot of dispute about just how far these devices can penetrate the body, but it's largely agreed visible red and orange light are only going to go about skin deep, maybe a little bit going about twice as deep. Some studies using cadavers have shown penetration from 808 nanometer near infrared going as deep as 40 millimeters, which is a little less than 2 inches. This means that near infrared could dramatically increase the activity of brain stimulation as compared to red light therapy. And keep in mind, when we surround it and hit it from multiple sides, that you're going to get quite a bit of light getting through just because you have such a high volume in the first place, coming at it from many different directions. The main mechanism for phototherapy is touted as increasing the activity of cytochrome C oxidase, or mitochondrial complex 4. This is the most important part of the ATP generation process because it is where the free radical byproducts are cleaned up. It's also how energy production rates are regulated, which keeps the mitochondrial complexes earlier in the chain from misfiring, and this keeps them from creating as many of the deadly byproducts that damage DNA and drive aging. Some have portrayed phototherapy as increasing the action of your mitochondria, that is, generating more energy, but the main benefit for mitochondria is the increased cleanup of byproducts and the inhibiting of more from being created, and in the long run this probably will lead to creating more just because you're going to not damage your mitochondria as much. And this is one of the most important things in aging. Cytochrome C oxidase seems to be affected well at the ranges of 600 to 700 nanometers and at 800 to 1200. Interestingly, there's a dead space in between 700 and just below 800. That doesn't mean there's no benefit to other wavelengths or other mechanisms that are occurring that might be going on there, including at these very high wavelengths, which seem to be getting more and more popular. But this is the therapeutic range for this mechanism, at least.
Now, the mechanisms, there's quite a few different mechanisms. The main mechanism revolves around the mitochondria. So the cytochrome C oxidase, which is unit 4 in the mitochondrial respiratory chain, is accepted as a chromophore for red and near infrared light, And the idea is that you get more oxygen consumption, more ATP, the mitochondrial membrane potential goes up. Other things happen, but one important thing is that the mitochondrial metabolism switches from glycolysis back towards oxidative phosphorylation, which is important because it has a few effects on the whole metabolism. You get a lot of signaling happens based on this mitochondrial activity. You get nitric oxide released, you get ATP and cyclic AMP, you get a brief burst of reactive oxygen species. These activate transcription factors, so June-Phos is AP1, I-kappa B allows NF-kappa B to go to the nucleus, and these transcription factors can trigger the expression of over 100 different genes, which is a long-lasting effect. So these proteins that are triggered by these transcription factors will last for hours, days, and even weeks. So a single exposure to light can have long-lasting effects. As I said, this switch of glycolysis to oxidative phosphorylation is important for two reasons. One is that stem cells are activated. Stem cells in their hypoxic niche carry out glycolysis, but when the mitochondria are activated, they need oxygen, so they have to get out of their niche when they can undergo proliferation and differentiation programs. The second effect of this glycolysis to OXPHOS switch is anti-inflammatory. So macrophages have an M1 phenotype and a pro-inflammatory carry out glycolysis. When OXPHOS is activated, they switch to the M2 anti-inflammatory phenotype. And if these happen to be microglia in the brain, they can undergo phagocytosis, for instance, disposing of amyloid plaque that clogs up the brain tail. But we did discover quite a few interesting things about how shining light on the head has beneficial effects. And we've summarized them in this diagram here. So there's a lot of different processes here, and there is positive evidence for all of them, actually.
Part of the reason for making this video is that I often get asked about fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia has now been convincingly shown to be a form of post-viral syndrome, which is essentially immune exhaustion. And taurine is also going to help with this. It's recently been shown that fibromyalgia can also be greatly affected by whole body red light therapy. So now we know what it is, and it's still hard to treat, but now at least we have some options. Since it helps a great deal with all immune system issues, 72 to 96 hour fast can help a great deal with this topic. That's probably the best bet to get long-term relief. The supplement PEA can help with short-term relief, and phototherapy as an immune system stimulator should also be able to help with long-term relief, and it's already been proven to work well with short-term relief. Experimentally, phototherapy has been shown to reduce pain and blood pressure in fibromyalgia patients and also improve the psychological status and the ability to work and perform daily activities and the self-reporting values of how well they're doing. Phototherapy should also reduce blood pressure in all subjects, and it's probably going to improve pain from all sources too, not just from fibromyalgia. Phototherapy is shown to help with peripheral neuropathy, mental illness, and with neuroinflammation, which is a part of all mental illness, and also autism, the effects of chemotherapy, stimulating neurostem cells, recoloring hair, hair restoration, and much more. The most famous benefit of phototherapy is for the skin, and visible red light will have the most effect for this purpose. It has been shown to increase skin collagen production. Just be aware you can have too much of a good thing in this case. The instructions on your device will be a good starting point, and you can probably exceed those doses, but at some point you can do too much and you will lose some of the benefits or even have negative effects. This has mainly been shown to be an issue in rodents because they're much more easily overwhelmed with overdose of light because they're very small. But it probably also occurs in humans at some point. But keep in mind you can only shift the light source around and target the same destination from all around. So if your shoulder is injured, you can use light from the front, light from the back, light from the side, and on and on. And that way you can get more of the light into your joint area without overwhelming the skin in one area. On a personal note, I tried phototherapy only out of desperation when I had a shoulder injury causing constant pain that just wouldn't go away. I really didn't expect it to work, but at that point I was willing to try essentially anything, and I had tried pretty much everything by that point. I got relief immediately from phototherapy, though I did much greater doses than the instructions stated. I was able to start working out again, and that made me heal up even quicker, and in no time I was back to normal. I've also noticed that it helps a great deal with my sleeping issues, and if I just put it on my forehead before I go to sleep, I always slip away in almost no time at all. Red light and near-infrared therapy has many benefits, and I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of the possibilities and also of the mechanisms. Everything has improved from immune system stimulation, blood flow, to collagen and wound healing, to blood pressure and even fibromyalgia. It also helps with autism, Down syndrome, sleeping issues, depression, neuroinflammation, and essentially all mental illness. It also has possible benefits in exercise performance, and it's been a mainstay for many decades for tendon injury. In fact, it's been used for that purpose since the 70s. I also want to say that some people suggest staring at the sun in the morning or evening, or wearing blue blocking glasses. This is all pure nonsense. Your body is designed to deal with blue light, and it even has some benefits. Just make sure you get plenty of red light too, and this will trigger the cytochrome C oxidase in order to ensure that your mitochondria clean up any excess energy production that's brought about by high levels of light. It also doesn't matter what time of day you do this. There's a lot of pseudoscience and speculation out there about light exposure and a lot of evolutionary psychology kind of stuff going on, but there's never any real data to back it up. It's just all conjecture. The blinking is also not needed, and it's absolute nonsense. This belief comes about from the time this therapy was performed with lasers, and these had capacitors, and that meant they would shoot off in little bursts, kind of like blinking. But modern LEDs don't have these issues. They can just continuously operate, and they're actually much stronger than a lot of these lasers were that they were initially using. A lot of these lasers were no better than the kind you can get in a pin laser, which is just pretty much worthless, but it still had detectable effects. And that's right, you can even heal wounds more rapidly, even diabetic wounds, just by putting a little pin laser on there. It's kind of amazing. Now, specialized phototherapy medical devices are astronomically expensive, and they cost thousands of dollars. And some of them are really no different than those pin lasers I was talking about. Thankfully, you can get the same benefits at home with rather cheap devices that probably cost $50 or so and often have 10 times the power output. So you can do the same thing in just 1/10 of the time, so why not just do it that way? Most channels who cover phototherapy will provide an affiliate link to an extremely expensive device that costs $400 to $800 to provide the same output as the low EMS device that I have pictured in the video, and I'll put it up on the screen at this time. And I don't get any commission from that at all. I'm only recommending it to you guys because it works so well for me. And I'd never become an affiliate to that company because it's a garbage company. But that's the only place I found that you could buy it, at least that exact model. Now, you might be able to get it somewhere else just as cheap, I don't know. Anyway, I intend to get more of these phototherapy devices. I've got 4 of them that are working right now, and I want to get about 10 of them and just put them all around the bed in a way that I can just get the whole body. Because right now I can only do like either the head and shoulders or go down by the feet. I want to be able to get it to where I can do everything all at once in just a few minutes, and that would be great. And these things are definitely worth the money. I've had a better return on that investment than pretty much anything else that I've invested in.
You're never gonna regret this, Ray.
My parents left me that house. I was born there.
You're not gonna lose the house. Everybody has 3 mortgages nowadays.
And the interest rate alone for the first 5 years comes to $95,000.